When you look at a warship, you see flags, missiles, and power. I look at it and I see a giant floating furnace where tax dollars are shoveled in by the truckload. Imagine buying a brand new Ferrari. It's beautiful, it's fast, it's expensive. Now imagine driving it off a cliff into the ocean. Tomorrow you buy another one and drive it off the cliff again. And you do that every single day. That is roughly the cost of keeping a modern destroyer at sea for 24 hours. Just in fuel alone, this steel monster burns through the budget of a small town. But fuel is actually the cheap part of the equation. Today we are going to audit the Navy. We are going to count the food, the salaries, the rust, and the logistics to answer one question. Why does a single day in the ocean cost more than you will earn in your entire life? Let's dive in. Let's start with the thirst. Modern warships like the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer don't run on hybrid batteries. They run on massive gas. Turbine engines, basically jet engines strapped to propellers. At cruising speed, a destroyer burns about 1,000 gallons of fuel per hour. There are 24 hours in a day. That is 24,000 gallons of diesel marine fuel every single day. If the captain orders flank speed, maximum speed, that number triples. At current military logistics prices, the fuel bill for just one day of patrolling sits between $80,000 and $100,000. Think about that. The ship hasn't fired a shot. It hasn't launched a helicopter. It is just floating. And that already costs as much as a house in the Midwest. Every single day. A ship isn't just steel, it's 300 to 350 human beings, and they all need 3 hots and a cot. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, plus mid-rats, midnight rations for the night watch. That is over 1,000 meals served every 24 hours. We aren't talking about instant noodles. The military standard requires protein, vegetables, coffee. On average, feeding a destroyer crew costs about $4,000 to $5,000 a day. But here's the kicker: water. You're surrounded by the ocean, but you can't drink it. The ship spends a massive amount of energy running desalination plants, showers, laundry, cooking. It's all desalinated water. Every time a sailor turns on a tap, somewhere in the hull, a machine is burning expensive fuel to turn salt water into fresh water. A glass of water on a ship costs 10 times more than it does in your kitchen. Now for the biggest expense: people. Unlike fuel, you have to pay people even when they are asleep. The crew of a destroyer are highly trained specialists: radar technicians, nuclear engineers on carriers, gas turbine mechanics. When you add up base pay, housing allowances, and specifically sea pay and imminent danger pay, the daily payroll for one ship is roughly $150,000. Yes, you heard that right. The humans cost more than the fuel. Every day at sea is a drain on the budget. A ship without a crew is just a floating scrap heap. The crew is the most expensive asset on board. A modern warship is essentially a floating supercomputer wrapped in armor. The Aegis combat system and its massive radar arrays consume megawatts of electricity. The generators on a single destroyer produce enough power to run a city of 50,000 people. All that electricity comes from the same fuel tanks. Turn on the long-range air search radar, fuel consumption goes up. Cooling systems for the server rooms, fuel consumption goes up. Air conditioning in the Persian Gulf, fuel consumption goes up. Roughly 20% to 30% of the fuel isn't used to move the ship forward. It's used just to keep the screens on and the missiles seeing their targets. That is the price of modern warfare. The ocean is a giant acid bath. Salt water destroys everything: steel, wiring, rubber, electronics. A ship starts dying the moment it touches the water. Fighting corrosion is a 24/7 job. Paint, grease, filters, spare parts. On average, a ship burns through $10,000 to $15,000 a day just in consumables and minor repairs. These are the invisible costs: replacing gaskets, patching pipes, changing filters in the water plant. If the crew stopped doing this for 1 week, the ship would turn into a rust bucket unfit for combat. The ship literally sheds money just to stay in one piece. Imagine ordering a pizza, but you are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. To get that pizza or a spare part for a radar to you, the Navy needs another ship, a supply tanker. That supply ship also burns fuel and pays a crew. In logistics, there is a concept called the fully burdened cost of fuel. A gallon of diesel bought in port might cost $3, but by the time a tanker carries it 2,000 miles to a destroyer in a combat zone, that gallon effectively costs $10 or $15. So when we say a ship burned $100,000 in fuel, the real cost to the taxpayer might be $300,000 because you have to pay for the delivery service. This is the number nobody thinks about, but it's the scariest one. Warship has a lifespan, let's say 30 years. Every day at sea wears out the hull and engines faster than sitting in port. Engines have a lifespan in hours, gun barrels have a lifespan in rounds fired, the hull has a lifespan in metal fatigue. A mid-life upgrade for a destroyer costs hundreds of millions of dollars. If you take the construction cost, $2 billion, and the future repair costs and divide them by the ship's life, the daily depreciation is around $200,000. You wake up, drink your coffee, and your ship just lost the value of a luxury home. Just because it got one day older. A ship doesn't just wander out to sea. Before a deployment, there are months of workups. Loading the ammo. One Tomahawk missile costs $2 million. A destroyer can carry 90 of them. You are floating on top of a $200 million explosives stockpile. Crew training, certifications, war games, all of these are hidden costs baked into the combat day. For a ship to spend one day in a real operation, it had to spend 10 days in training and preparation, burning money the whole time. The efficiency is low. You pay for 365 days to get maybe 100 days of actual presence. Let's add it all up. Fuel, food, payroll, maintenance, logistics, and depreciation. According to Navy budget reports, the total operating and support cost for an Arleigh Burke destroyer is roughly $70 to $80 million per year. If you divide that by the days it is actually deployed and useful, one day at sea costs the taxpayer between $300,000 and $500,000, $500,000 per day. In 1 week of patrolling, a single ship burns enough money to build a brand new elementary school. And in a carrier strike group, there are 5 of these ships, plus the aircraft carrier, which costs 10 times more. And here's the final fact that changes how you see the military. When the government buys a warship for $2 billion, they are only paying 30% of the real price. The other 70% is the cost of operating it over 30 years. Buying a ponte warship is like a down payment on a mortgage. The real payments start later. The true cost of a destroyer isn't $2 billion, it's $6 or $7 billion by the time it is retired. These are the most expensive toys in human history. A navy is the most expensive way to burn money ever invented. Every day at sea is a fortune thrown into the furnace. But why do nations pay it? Because one day of this ship parking off a foreign coast might prevent a war that would cost trillions. Or it might start one. It is an insurance policy that costs billions, and we pray we never have to file a claim. Subscribe if you want the truth about the price of power.